RWBY. Yeah, you probably know where this is going. Considering Warner Bros. Is no longer having it with the current direction of RWBY, I think it's safe to say that the series has not done all that well in its later years. What's sad is that I think RWBY actually had a great deal of potential, and that it deserved a lot better of a treatment than what it got. The unfortunate reality now is that there's nothing more than a small contingent of loyalist stans still keeping the series alive, which isn't enough to make Warner Bros. Want to keep producing the series. This should come as no surprise, though, because it comes on the heels of the disastrously bad RWBY Justice League crossover that managed to bastardize one of the best characters in fiction. So what exactly is RWBY? Well, it's another American anime that attempted to capture the magic of the Japanese entertainment phenomenon, but failed because it tried too hard at the same time to westernize everything that it was. To say, though, that RWBY is garbage or completely not worth your time would be a lie, because it actually did have an incredible start. The world of RWBY, known as Remnant, and it's a very different world than ours, a completely different one, is overrun by creatures called Grimm that are attracted to negative emotion and fear. Now, these creatures take a lot of different forms, but the most common one is the demonic-looking hellhound with the skull over its head. Now, in order to push back these forces of darkness, the four major nations of the world established schools to train up soldiers with the power to fight back against them. These people would eventually become known as huntsmen. Huntsmen and huntresses possess superhuman abilities called semblances, which gives them a unique power only they can use. And they're allowed to wield special weapons created for their unique fighting style and to match their powers. If anything, RWBY had a solid creative foundation and some very interesting design choices. And it very quickly establishes that RWBY is a very uniquely talented character, while at the same time setting up for the larger conflicts of the series. The fact that she's very young and very talented makes her pretty arrogant, which is the biggest stumbling point for her throughout the first couple of volumes of the series. Because she's flawed, she's set up for the character arc of overcoming that arrogance and really becoming the hero that the story needs. From a creative standpoint, RWBY is a very interesting take on fantasy fiction. It's got its basis in fairy tales and classical literature, hence names like the Grimm or Nevermore, and utilizes that very intriguing basis in fairy tales quite well in the early volumes, setting up with the tale of the four maidens, the tale of the two brothers, the girl in the tower, to prelude the revelation of Remnant's ancient history and the centuries-long conflict it's been embroiled in. With the first 3 volumes focusing on events leading up to the fall of Beacon Academy, the story was running really well. It established the conspiracy Torchic was planning and how his plans to destroy Vale came to fruition. All things considered, it was a good story, hitting some really strong, well-developed plot points with characters I genuinely came to really love. If you could stomach the abysmal animation quality of the series, which it looked like it was made in Gmod at times, it was honestly something I could respect. I won't really touch on the animation in detail, but it was not at all something amazing, though it still did have its charms. RWBY's only leg to stand on, though, is its story, which is an awfully convenient segue into the major problem with this series: the slow decline of said story. After the fall of Vale and the death of Professor Ozpin, some of our characters set out to look into some of the wild things that have been happening outside the walls. Yang is too depressed over her defeat at the hands of Adam Taurus to do anything other than mope. Blake is shaken up by the return of her dark past and runs to the edge of the earth, and Pyrrha is legit dead. That leaves RWBY to travel as the fill-in for Team Juniper. At this point, the Western obsession with drama and conflict starts to seep into the story, and alter it at a core level. You see, RWBY at its inception was a shonen, a story about a team of teens fighting monsters for the fate of the world. It was largely centered around this plot point, and developing the characters into mighty warriors who would be able to then join forces at the end and defeat the villain in an epic final battle. Creative talent behind RWBY, though, started to forget their core audience after that point, though, which led to RWBY slowly shifting from a shonen to a shoujo. Suddenly, the overall plot and the epic battle that was unfolding around the world was no longer the focus, and instead all of the minutiae of teen drama and relationships was under the microscope. And this all began happening around Volume 4, when it really started setting up for all the relationship drama that would happen later in the series. Look, I'm playing a dangerous game here because you can get called some really, really nasty shit for saying anything negative about RWBY. So I'm going to preface all of my statements with this. I have never cared once whether you slam clams or ride rockets. Your bedroom activity means nothing to me because the only thing I care about is the content of your character. So yeah, the gay ships in this series don't affect me one way or the other. If we really want to go there, my first video on this channel was a review of a series about lesbian schoolgirl assassins, and I loved that show. Put in as simple a term as I can, my issues with RWBY were with how it was handled. Where volumes 4 through 7 were a slow slide down a sandpaper slope, grating at your ass with obnoxious character drama, Volume 9 yeets the entire series off the emotional teen drama cliff. It was out of nowhere that people started developing all these weird emotional issues and started making mind-numbingly bad decisions. While I had been worn thin by other volumes and their poor handling of story content, Volume 8 killed any motivation I had to continue watching the series. When Volume 9 dropped, I passed, and I took the cliff notes, and I had some things to say about that. I'm not actually going to sit here and judge Volume 9 because I didn't actually watch it. To highlight what I'm talking about, let me talk about Blake Yang for a bit. It was very obvious from the end of Volume 3 that these two were getting shipped. Still, it had to add the extra drama of putting Sun Wukong into the mix because drama. The issue isn't the ship itself. It's the disastrously bad way it was handled. Dragged out for far too long with an obvious ending while trying to play at the will they won't they game nobody was buying. By the time they finally confirmed it, Volume 9 was using RWBY to voice the concerns of exasperated fans towards the whole thing.
Right? Smiles all around. Maybe even finally get our feelings sorted out. Good for you, by the way. We're all so happy for you.
Agonizing teen drama. Look, even amidst all the bad, there were still some things that I really did like. While the series was continuing to focus in on side character arcs and relationships that didn't seem like they were integral to the story, some of them actually turned out to be entertaining, or at least very creative in a way that engaged me. You can disagree with me on this, but I think Jean Arc is perhaps the greatest character in the series, and the writers basically took every opportunity they could to shit on him throughout all 9 volumes of the series. His love interest dies. His powers suck. He's often treated as pathetic and useless. And the one goal he sets out to accomplish by himself fails so badly he becomes a sad, broken old man clinging to whatever he can find. In the first half of the series, though, he's one of the most compelling characters in the cast. A wayward man with a golden heart, someone who's just ready to find his purpose and find his place. Jean lies his way into Beacon Academy at the beginning of the series. And yes, the headmaster, Ozpin, absolutely does notice and signs off on it anyway. Still, after finding an unlikely ally and friend in one of the most skilled students there, Jean starts to change for the better. With Pyrrha's help, Jean actually becomes a man worthy of his position at the head of Team Juniper. So in spite of being a liar and a loser, simply chasing glory, he ends up actually becoming someone rather heroic. I think one of his greatest moments, though, comes after Pyrrha's death and in Volume 4, where RWBY catches him off in the woods training by himself using some old recordings Pyrrha had left behind.
Just like we practiced. Follow these instructions. Shield up. Keep your grip tight. Don't forget to keep your front foot forward. Ready? Go. Again. And again. Okay. Now, assuming you aren't cheating, we can take a break.
And there's also something to be said about Ironwood's fall from grace being a good example of a hero corruption arc. You already had a guy who was paranoid to shit about Salem and the Grimm. Then he finds out that his closest confidant was lying to him and that the battle he was prepping for was outright impossible to win. With his confidence undermined, Ironwood starts to make rash and slightly illogical decisions. While his heart is in the right place, he's no longer seeing things through the lens of justice and goodness. He starts taking action to try and protect the people he's in charge of, but he is oftentimes willing to break a few eggs to make the omelet, so to speak. He gives into his fears, and that is ultimately what leads to his death. Now, there is one thing I forgot to touch on when I first recorded this video and got all the way through editing and realized I needed to cover this because it wouldn't be fair to the series. The fight scenes in this series are actually really good. If they had a more traditional-ish animation style, 2D, they would look freaking amazing. But they're choreographed well, they flow well, they're hype as hell. If there's one thing RWBY actually really delivers on, it is the fight scenes. They're very good. Yes, at one time, RWBY absolutely was worth a shot, but it started putting too much emphasis on character drama and sensationalism for its own good. And thus, at this point, I can say I would not recommend you go and watch this series. RWBY has its fair bit of good and its fair bit of bad. And at this point, I'm pretty sure the bad outweighs the good. In knowing the direction the story is going and having my own theories about how things are going to ultimately go down, I have no interest in the rest of what's going to happen with this series, if it even gets made, because Volume 10 has not been greenlit. Rooster Teeth is not producing a Volume 10 right now. It's sad because this was a series I really genuinely liked at one point, but now it's just a 5 out of 10. Overall, mid. Volume 1 through 3 was an 8. Volume 4 through 7 was a 6. Volume 8 was a 2. But hey, at this point, that's about enough out of me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you consider liking and subscribing. I would really appreciate the support. Anyway, that's about enough out of me now, so I will see you later. Thanks for your time. Bye.